that we're seeing Bomb Warriors now start to be left up with some, whether they're hard target or soft target or not, but players are now experimenting with different bans, whereas in the earlier weeks it was, oh, they're playing Warrior, it's banned. Oh, they're playing Warrior, it's banned. And I think that might have been, I agree, I think that might have been a bit of autopilot from the players.
Yeah, you know me, Raven, I love a good gloat. And yes, I'm certainly going to bring up that I've been saying this for a couple of weeks now, that if you want to bring Mali Druid, you should look more into a leaving up on Warrior kind of lineup, not necessarily a hard target like Wama or Chonsu's doing, but something where you just, have a few good matchups, maybe one or two oozes here and there just to allow yourself to leave it up. And then the deck does start to make a lot more sense, and it seems like some of Europe's very best are starting to come around to that opinion as well.
Well, let's kick it off. Overgrowth in the opening hand there for Jarla and Guardian Animals. So let's take the only two boxes that matter for Druid. Where Seiko, yet again, another Bladestorm keep. So I'm going to tell you right now, when I queue Bomb Warrior on ladder against Druid, I'm keeping those Bladestorms. I do what I'm told when pro players tell me.
Don't you feel good? You've learned a thing, Raven. That's what this is all about.
I'll tell you right now, during Grandmasters or after casting a Masters Tour, I truly appreciate my job, because not only have I just got a cool job, obviously, but I get so much better at Hearthstone than I was in off seasons, right? Because I am consuming so much high-level play that I'm not only super hyped to play myself, but also just the fact that you learn so much watching these players, like week in, week out, or even just through a long Swiss tournament like a Masters Tour. I love it, honestly. It's great.
And from talking to me as well, right? Surely.
Well, when I talk to you not on broadcast, it's much less teaching and more just telling me I'm stupid. So maybe that actually negates the lessons I learned casting. But anyway, in this game, Seiko has got hold of at least a fairly aggressive opening with double Wrench Caliber in his hand now.
Yeah, this is the goods, right? He's got that Bladestorm, but he also has Wrench Caliber to support a more aggressive plan if one opens up for him, and then Cutting Class to continue to support that Wrench Caliber, dig through, find additional cards, find the upgrades, find the brawls, find the shield slams, find that good balance of offense and defense that he needs to get over the line. It's a pretty good looking hand.
Yeah, now looking at Jarla's list as well, it's the 1 Thresher, 1 Pet, 2 Twilight Runner, with 1 runner already in hand, which means he has basically a 1/1/1 beast makeup left in his deck for those 2 Guardian Animals. So a little bit of a whiff, but honestly, when you play Mali Druid in this form, you don't expect the Guardian Animals twice in a game. It really is, you just want the one good one. It's going to coin out the Overgrowth. What this does as well is, although he can't obviously go straight into Guardian Animals, it does allow him to just throw down this Twilight Runner, potentially, or at least have the flexibility of the swipe as well in the hand. So, still has a few options here for Jarla with this play.
Yes. Yeah, essentially Guardian Animals comes down on the same turn. Well, and now it doesn't. Now it comes down 1 turn earlier. But previous to that Innovate draw, it was going to come down on the same turn regardless, but he gave himself something else to do on this turn by just accelerating that Overgrowth by 1 turn, so you really like the curve.
And I know you're not the biggest Malygos Druid fan in the world right now, but do you like the makeup that, for example, Jarl and a few of the other players have of quite a thin, only 4 total beast package? Do you think that's needed in Malygos Druid?
I mean, it's versus the Lightning Blooms, right? That's the big debate.
Right.
I think the problem is, it's not that they only play 4 beasts because they want to play 4 beasts and they really like their second Guardian Animals being dead. It's just that you can only fit 30 cards in your deck, and Malygos Druid requires you to play a lot more other cards to support your overall strategy. So yeah, Pocket Train and a few others are certainly on this ride of trying to cut Lightning Bloom from the deck to make room for potentially second Overflow or more beasts or whatever else people are trying to fit into it. Which I do get the theory behind, and certainly you've been quick to point out during the broadcast today every time that Lightning Blooms have ended up being dead in hand. But actually, I think both times you've done that, they've then been used in the game-ending combo at the end of the game.
Nope, not convinced.
So I think it's still very much up in the air, and I think it's a leading question, and it's not. I'd love to play more beasts, so Guardian Animals won more games, but if I was going to do that, I just wouldn't play Mali Druid, Like, if I wanted a more straight-up game plan, I'd just be playing Survival Druid.
Yeah, though, funnily enough, with the 2-3 on board for Seiko, he wasn't able to utilize the Blade Storm as a response to this Twilight Runner. So he is just going to be left up and able to have to trade into a minion at this point, or at least until the Guardian Animals comes down. But also, most importantly, keep Jarla's hand size rather large.
Rather large indeed. So here comes second Twilight Runner now. Jarla is going to have to dump something to make room for all this value goodness. If he chooses to attack with the second Twilight Runner at all.
I was going to say, could he ever just use like Moonfire instead? Is that wild? Maybe Moonfire's good. And just like keep one of the runners stealth. I think that was an option. Also, why is Jarla nearly dead? Wait, he's on 11. When did he die? Or does he have to dump something? How many bombs are in the deck?
None. He's drawn them all.
He has to dump something then, because he wants cards.
That's why he's nearly dead. He's just drawn both the bombs that have been shuffled in up to this point.
Look at the deck list for 2 seconds, and he's on 11 health.
Yep.
Didn't even see the bombs go off.
Curious.
Nice setup for the board, honestly, to go around Bladestorm again. It's like just not a nice Bladestorm board in any way, shape or form here for Seiko.
Yeah, Krasnov Sword and Board, though, is very, very clean here, and now Seiko has very much earned the right just to swing face with all of these weapon charges. Down to 7, back to 1 bomb in the deck now for Jarla. Jarla going to be some distance away from getting anything done here, and Jarla did choose to 10-card that turn, and it was not the 1 bomb that ended up getting overdrawn. In fact, quite the opposite. Jarla would have liked that card very much.
I wonder where you were going with that. I thought that the opposite of a bomb is like a yak. It's like, or whatever that beast actually is meant to be. Very confused for a second, but I think most importantly, this because this deck isn't a survival of the fittest deck, Seiko can just disrespect this Thresher, right? Okay, hit me for 4 because it's only really ever going to be 4.
Right.
How curious.
I think with Coerce and Bladestorm in hand as well, Seiko is well set up just to be able to be dealing with these kind of situations for 1 or 2 more turns yet. Has Cutting Class to support him, draw through to an additional Brawl or Barov or whatever mass removal he might end up needing at some point.
And I think the Coerce is a big deal as well, because I was even for a split second just wondering what happens if he just plays a Malygos this turn. And it dies a lot of the time, that's what happens, so...
Yep.
You're not going to see Jarla go for that.
Same deal, right? Jarla just trying to set up some kind of counter pressure with the Gidra, but Coerce will clear this up quite nicely. Oh, now the Horde Pillager coming out to play as well.
He just has Cutting Class as well. Like, just keep on drawing.
Does that get played this turn? Kind of messes with the curve a little bit in my eyes, that you can't now Coerce, swing, and re-equip a weapon this turn. A little bit awkward.
I guess so, but if you don't re-equip a weapon... okay, so the argument is Horde Pillager, right? Because maybe equipping a weapon this turn versus next turn probably doesn't make a ton of difference. Versus the card draw. Obviously, it's like, well, we could play Deathwing. But you know what I mean? Like, he drew into those cards, so...
Right.
I think this is okay. I think there's a lot of the time on the average hand he gets to spend 4 mana on a weapon in some way next turn.
Yeah, it seems fine.
Yeah, though 3 health and a Dream. Teacher's Pet burnt last turn for Jarla, which means that taunt just isn't there. Germination is, or does act as a taunt if cast on a minion, of course.
Yeah, 2 bombs in deck now. That was a 1 in 8 to die for Jarla that turn. But he does need to find some way to defend from just straight up lethal.
And after seeing Coerce, does he just do the combo turn, even though it's not the full combo?
Maybe, yeah.
Like, is it what else is it? Pass and just have 4 health. You know, like that's what the alternative feels like, right?
Right.
At least he gets an Omu taunt, can drop the Malygos and push damage.
It's just like, what do you actually do with the refreshed crystals at that point? Nothing, right? I mean, I guess it's better than just blowing yourself up with the Breath of Dreams, but Jarla had no way of knowing there, of course. Again, that was only like a 1 in 7.5 outcome in that spot. Jarla had to go digging for something to do. But it was that kind of scenario which still makes me wonder a little bit about instantly re-equipping the weapon that turn. Because, you know, you brought up the Deathwing argument, but I do think it's a compelling argument, because the ability to already have a weapon equipped, Deathwing their taunt out of the way, and then still swing face with the weapon on that turn immediately could have just been lethal in a lot of worlds. Straight up, just having that mana already allocated, which I think is kind of interesting.
Yeah, 100%, but to be fair, he didn't have Deathwing in his hand at the time. That's what the card he drew into. So it's like, if you draw exactly Deathwing, then 100%, yeah. But a really tough call to make. I think, in general, the card draw is pretty solid. But that does mean Seiko takes a relatively straightforward game number 1, honestly. Just a very aggressive opening with that Bomb Warrior, and putting himself in the lead for this series so far. We are going to go to a quick break while we get them ready for game number 2, though. So don't go anywhere, and we'll be right back to finish off our last match of the day over here in Hearthstone Grandmasters.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to Mull It Over. Today we dive into one of the most popular archetypes from both GM and Masters Tour Montreal, Soul Demon Hunter. When this deck was first played in GM, I admittedly was one of the dum-dums referring to it as a control deck. But while it does feature efficient removal cards, the primary game plan is very simple. Buff your hero's attack and hit him in the head. While historically in Hearthstone you would use weapon swings to protect your minions, things work differently for Soul DH. Your priority is to connect as many weapon hits to the face as possible, using cards like Shard Shatter Mystic and Blade Dance to clear minions instead. Warma demonstrates this by sending his Marrow Slicer to the face, despite it having a clean kill on Swids' Soul Shard Lapidary, knowing that he has Blade Dance for a board clear on the following turn. That being said, the best Soul DH players identify when to hold back on weapon swings, usually when you have no follow-up weapons in hand. In this game against Kin's Druid, Shaxi holds back his first Marrow Slicer charge, knowing that he had a slow start and would be unable to close out the game in 2 turns' time. Therefore, it's better to hold the Slicer for potential Blade Dance utility and more flexibility for his Glaive-bound Adept turn. It's harder to be patient when your opponent has no board at all, but Possessi holds on to his Marrow Slicer swing against Tempo Mage because he has both Blade Dances in hand, and he knows Alutamu could potentially set up a Mana Giant board or a Jandis board. His Blade Dances later decimate the majority of Alutamu's threats, and despite the second one unluckily leaving up the taunt minion, in the end Possessi clutches out the win. Before you can build up that damage though, ideally you want to curve out with Spirit Jailer, Wandmaker, and Mana Feeder Panthera, all 3 of which are almost universally kept in the mulligan regardless of matchup. Some lists, like Surrender's last week, even run Battle Fiends to double down on early aggression. An example of an ideal opener is Alutamu's 4 Keep versus Alan's Priest. It curves 1, 2, 3, 4 considering that Panthera is played as a 3-drop with your hero power in most cases. In fact, when you have a guaranteed turn 1 into turn 2 play, that heavily justifies keeping one of your mid-game powerhouse cards like Soul Shard Lapidary. Swids does so in the mirror, knowing that his turn 1 Spirit Jailer will likely mean that the Lapidary is active on turn 5. These somewhat greedier keeps are common when facing Priest. As you can see, Saiyan even holds on to Lore Keeper Polkelt when he's on coin. And while Polkelt is not seen in every Soul DH list, if played at the right time, it can guarantee a Skull of Gul'dan drawn in the outcast position. Because priests tend to easily answer the first few waves of threats that Demon Hunter puts on board, and can consistently heal back up, additional card draw is important to keep the damage coming. So it's no surprise that Language Hacker keeps Spectral Sight, especially in outcast position. Against Warma's anti-aggro tech list, Swids even keeps Skull off coin in a non-outcast position. He also keeps Marrow Slicer, knowing Warma doesn't run weapon removal. And while Swids knows that he's unlikely to hit an early curve, this mulligan helps him play the long game. In the end, Swids gets to the very last card in his deck to close out the game. On the flip side, there are matchups where Soul DH does have to be a bit more defensive, at least in the early game, leading to keeps on cards like Shard Shatter Mystic and Blade Dance. For example, ETC keeps Shard Shatter against Weapon Rogue, as it can bypass stealth to deal with almost any early board. Language Hacker keeps it versus Face Hunter, while also tossing away Mana Feeder Panthera, which is usually a keep. I think this is smart because the Shard Shatter turn would most likely conflict with the Panthera turn, so instead, Hacker gives himself the best shot of getting Spirit Jailer on turn 1 as an activator. He's heavily rewarded with a turn 2 Shard Shatter activation against Eddie's wide board. Against Druid, which is one of Soul DH's poorest matchups, Just Saiyan makes a very cool but not obvious full keep. The Wand Maker as an early play unlocks his Spectral Sight in outcast position, ensuring that he has things to do in the early game. But he also holds on to Marrow Slicer and Blade Dance, already setting up an answer for a Guardian Animals board. Although it played out in a different way with the cards he later drew, he does get the clean Blade Dance on Killin' All Day's double Twilight Runners in the mid-game, which buys Saiyan enough time to put together his own lethal. Finally, let's discuss one of the trickiest cards to maneuver in the deck, Magtheridon. Some lists cut Mag altogether because the big guy can easily be answered by cards such as Blackjack Stunner, Shadow Word Death, and Blade Storm. For example, in this spot against Weapon Rogue, Tom60229 has the option to go Magtheridon on turn 4, and on the next turn activate it with Shard Shatter Mystic. However, he would be guaranteed to take 8 damage from minions and very likely more from weapons, not to mention the threat of the Sap in Surrender's list, so Tom holds back. Also worth mentioning, Mag should almost never be played this early against rogues that run Shadow Step, which can ruin the activation. But in other matchups, Magtheridon can be your trump card, and you're free to slam it down without activating it on the same turn. Against No Hands Gamer's Tempo Warrior, which runs no Blade Storm, Bloody Face plays it on turn 5 and activates it with Shard Shatter the turn after. If No Hands didn't have Lord Barov in hand exactly, the 12-12 sticking would have basically ended the game on the spot. Perhaps the matchup where Magtheridon is most relevant is against Druid, which has neither a way to transform or bounce the 1-3 tokens, nor good ways to kill the 12-12 body itself. Which is why Tiz just drops the Magtheridon on turn 4, despite not having an immediate activation afterward. Possessi still has to respect the possibility of a board clear, and so he plays a Teacher's Pet instead of developing a huge Speaker Gidra. By the time Tiz gets the Magtheridon live, he actually doesn't even benefit from the board clear effect, but he does threaten lethal with the 12-12 body. Possessi is forced to expend tons of resources to kill it, and Tiz sticks an unchallenged Soul Shard Lapidary to close out the game. And that's it for this week's episode. Catch you next time as we tackle more of the early game and mulligan decisions from the best decks of Hearthstone Grandmasters.
Welcome back, everyone. We are ready to continue our last series of the day. Seiko just took a win over Jarla in game number 1, but there's plenty more where that came from. I believe we're going to go into a Rogue versus Priest matchup. Seiko on the Rogue, Jarla on the Priest, and some potential long game coming up for us here, Sotul.
Yeah, could indeed be a grindy one. We saw multiple games, both with Mage and Rogue, who both approach this matchup very similarly, I would say. Go the distance against Priest, and a couple of series involving Tice and a few others, and really set out for the long game, but it can go in both directions. There is the possibility for one or either deck to just draw pretty dead. They do have to hit certain cards to make sure that their resources are staying high. If you don't hit those cards from one side, it can look like a bit of a blowout in either direction. You know, either big questing comes down early, big Edwin comes down early, and there's no answer from the Priest, and that just ends the game. Or the Rogue just doesn't really hit any of those resource generators that you really need, and they just gas out way too quickly to be able to keep up with the Priest. And those are possible outcomes in the matchup, but generally, if both players hit a pretty average or above average draw, you're going to see this one go quite long.
Yeah, and I think we can slowly start to add Priest to the like Mage kind of description, because, well, honestly, if you look at these two decks plus Mage, the more and more the decks get refined, the lower curve they become, generally.
Yes.
Because of the access right now in game to such high-value, low-cost cards, it just seems correct. Why would you pay 8 mana for a high-value card? You can just pay that for, like, 1 mana in this other card, right? That's what the matchups for all these decks right now feel like, even to the extent where Jarla is choosing to play or include a Twilight Drake and 2 Cabal Acolytes in his list as well. Normally those kind of step on each other in a one or another way. But he's also, his top end is just Murozond, Soul Mirror, 1 Cabal Shadow Priest, and then the Cobalt Sticky Finger and 2 Cobalt Spellkin. So there's not like really that general end game we've historically been used to. And I feel like you could give us another month and we can have like Warrior that curves out at 5. We're gonna, I would say Hunter, but it kind of already does. But we're gonna just have more and more classes that just stop at like 4 or 5 mana because they can just generate stuff earlier on anyway. It's getting kind of crazy.
It's interesting, right? Because Priest and Mage actually do it in a similar way, where it's relying on Wand Maker and Cobalt Spellkin, and just the value that comes off the 1-mana spells in both classes. I guess by that metric, Rogue is actually the most different, because they don't rely on that neutral card engine to keep their value high. They kind of have their own class tools exclusively with the Hanar, the Secret Passage, and so on and so forth.
So far, though, speaking of low curves and consistent openings, this is not one of them from Jarla, as he has Death, Pain, Soul Mirror, and just 2 Cleric of Scales that are quite stranded right now. So, not the opening he's after, and I wonder, with no 1 or 2 drop being played, if we're going to see an earlier than normal quest and adventure from Seiko.
Yeah, Jarla does at least have the Shadow Word Death, so he's not just going to instantly get smoked by the first big threat that comes down from Seiko. But you'll very, very often in this matchup see questing played initially as a 4/4, just to be as resilient as possible to potential removal. And then even if the Shadow Word Death is there, you get 1 turn where maybe you get to connect for 6 or 7 with your questing adventurer after you've stabilized it as a 4/4 for 1 turn.
And although Jarla didn't play out anything last turn, Seiko didn't play anything out last turn, he does give him the opportunity now to go questing Coin 1 Thief, which does that exact job you were describing of creating a 4/4 and making a resilient minion to get that 1-punch attack the following turn. There's just nothing again for Jarla. Typical. I shout out the low curve consistency of these new style decks, and it just doesn't work. I am cursed.
Give me a quest.
Drew Miscreant, no consideration for diverting. Instantly goes in with the 4/4 questing. Very, very standard in the matchup.
It's just too good, isn't it? Because he not only gets to potentially pop off with the spell from the 1 Thief, but he also just has Plagiarize 1 Thief next turn. He has, Backstab into Miscreant. He has another questing. There's so many options that why go slow when you can go fast?
He has a Potion of Illusion.
Yeah, it's insane, actually, isn't it? You can just do like the same turn over and over for the rest of the game.
Yes, yeah. Questing Adventurer, make it a 4/4 player 1 Thief, get a Potion of Illusion every turn for the rest of the game. Seems good. You think Turtle Mage loops infinite potions? You haven't seen the real end game of the Potion of Illusion loop.
No, it's just Turtle Mage is going to be turned into a lower curve deck Sol that doesn't need to run Turtle anymore.
They do play Wand Makers. They're halfway there already.
Yeah, exactly.
Yikes.
Yeah. And does it have to be Potion here?
No. Absolutely not. It is a good potion, but it's also a very good Shadow Jeweler Hanar into Plagiarize.
Yeah,
honestly.
That has changed things, hasn't it? It really has. And he could even just whether he want to or not, but just the backstab for the 1/2 is just fine as well. Like if you really want extra damage. Not that 1's going to make too much difference.
Yeah, I'm not sure you do. I think the 1/2 just continuing to be on board and just chipping away from 1 is actually quite valuable here. I think with how dead the opponent's hand has been, you expect to see Shadow Word Death here, which is one of the reasons why I'd say it's a good Shadow Jeweler Hanar, because, Jarla kind of has to pick which threat to deal with, right?
Or not, in this respect, because he can deal with both with Shadow Word Pain.
Yeah. I mean, you're not playing around this, right?
No, I'm not suggesting to play around it by any means. But it just means, okay, your hand was bad, you just used your 2 removal, I'll just make the same board again.
Yeah.
And now... Yeah, he could take it slower, because he does still have this evil Miscreant.
What
And now he can
is in
activate it with the
Helen's way?
redemption as well, so he does have that option. Jarla considering playing just a 1-mana 1/1 here? Surely not.
Expect not to. He did keep one of these Cleric of Scales in his opening hand. I believe it was just a straight-up 1 keep of a Cleric of Scales and mulliganed everything else, looking for a Dragon Activator. But this is the problem. When you do whiff on those Dragon Activators, they are very miserable-looking cards when they get stuck in your hand like this.
And now, do you think it's fair to say that Seiko won't be overly precious about making a 4/4 exactly here? As Jarla does only run 1 Shadow of Death in his list.
Or... Yes, I do agree with that, but I think also coincidentally his hand just naturally makes a 4/4 this turn, right? Like I don't think this is super deliberate. It just happens to be what his hand does this turn. Evocation, obviously a completely absurd pickup, not quite as good. People get carried away with the Secret Passage interaction, and it is good, but I don't think the Secret Passage interaction is as good as the Sorcerer's Apprentice interaction. We're just used to the Sorcerer's Apprentice interaction at this point.
The Secret Passage interaction is like a nice bonus effect, whereas Apprentice is like the reason the deck exists. Cabal Shadow Priest, funnily enough, does play around the 2 removal cards that Jarla has given Seiko, which is kind of funny, but he's just going to go for this weapon steal instead.
Oh, this turn for Seiko.
Is Jarla just dead?
I think I'm in love with this turn from Seiko.
What
I would like to marry this turn.
Describe the turn.
Backstab the 4/4, Potion of Illusion, Cult Neophyte, double trade the 1/2s, hit face with the Questing Adventurer is what I'm looking at right now.
Sounds like an okay turn.
Seems like a really strong Cult Neophyte turn, because obviously you're going into the Soul Mirror turn, and again, echoing the sentiment of how dead your opponent's opening has been here.
Yeah, you can do that this order, right? I think you said Cult Neophyte last.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought you purposely didn't want a Cult Neophyte for 1 mana in hand. I was like,
nope.
God's pretty good.
And backstab, trade off the 1/2s, Giant Questing connects face, Soul Mirror is locked out. I was just about to say, you probably have a good read that Soul Mirror could be one of the cards in your opponent's hand, for the same reasons we've been talking about, just how dead this opening has been so far for Jarla. That those big end game cards are things that you will be accounting for in your opponent's hand. This just ticks all of the possible boxes you need here.
And the worst part is, Jarla knows there's 4 1-cost cards minimum in hand.
Yep.
Which means there's +4/+4 on this questing at minimum. Which is pretty close to lethal.
Shadow of Death! Oh! Just playable as well.
There is redemption,
Cult Neophyte conditions. There is redemption. You are right. Still gets the shake of the head out from Seiko, though.
I still love to imagine these spots. Seiko's like, I'm so unlucky.
I mean, he kind of is. He kind of is.
It's just funny as a viewer, right? It's just funny to watch.
Yeah.
He has like one of the most insane rogue hands I've ever seen. He's like, oh, I'm so unfortunate. It's great.
Give me a quest.
One thing he has to consider now is the single Cult Neophyte will not lock out a Soul Mirror now.
Correct.
So can he go fishing for something that will assist? Not really, right?
No.
All his discoveries are mage spells unless he goes Miscreant into Ethereal Lackey into Shadow Step.
Yeah, exactly.
And
I do kind of like the Miscreant coming down this turn, though, just because it does have that shape that resists the Soul Mirror that you are scared of this turn.
Oh! Hold on.
Hold on.
Just hold on 1 minute.
Yeah.
I mean, is there a great reason to go for the 1 thief instead of the Lackey here? I don't think so, right?
Whoa! to get these premium 8 drops for next turn, Raven?
I mean, sure.
How's that for a reason?
Quite results oriented, actually. That's how.
Yeah, yes, yes, it is. But you will accept it nonetheless.
I mean, I can't say you're wrong. I can just disagree with how you are right.
Yeah.
I wonder.
It has to be Soul Mirror, right? Wait, why is there another Shadow Word Death? What did I miss?
That came off the Sethic.
Oh, sure. So the 7 damage, if he just deaths, he could play Acolyte Death and steal one of the minions as well.
Pyro,
So
even?
Sure, yeah. Most importantly, he isn't forced into a Soul Mirror this turn, which
Right.
the downside being that it would be his whole turn if he did that, and he'd take 1 damage anyway, extra, because the Miscreant would live, of course. So yeah, not forced into this by any means.
Mm-hmm.
He's gonna pop it though.
It's the fear of the random mage spells, right? Is like the other lines that he can take here, potentially leave up 4 damage or more in play this turn, which then you're looking at being dead to Fireball, Pexis Blast, all kinds of things that
Argent
could potentially
Commander.
be generated here.
Oh, close. Skystalker now?
Skystalker looks pretty insane to me.
Yeah, there's no spells right now to really pay off the Xavius, and also it's just there's no natural plague or anything like that, right? So how are these minions actually dealt with? Even if they're Wave of Apathy, it's still chipping away significant amount of damage to Jarla right now.
Seiko just still has so much gas to back this up as well. Faceless Lackey, Ethereal Lackey still has that evocation, still has dirty tricks to dig him through his deck even further to secret passages, to Edwin Van Cleef.
Does Cabal Acolyte Shadow Word Ruin actually become a thing this turn? Makes them 2/3/4s and steals the Miscreant?
Okay.
I wonder.
He could roll the dice with a Wand Maker instead, but the second that isn't immediately perfect, you just die.
Yeah, I think like the issue with leaving damage up on board and just relying on a taunt being in the way is that you know your opponent has a Shadow Word Pain in their hand here as well, right? But
That is true, that is true.
I don't really see better alternatives.
Yeah. Like, it would literally be one maker, Wave of Apathy, right? But that is, I feel, less consistent than hoping you don't take 3 additional damage this turn.
Yep.
Dance, puppet, dance.
So Jarla will know that he takes 6 minimum this turn, which means this Ethereal Lackey or this Evocation have options.
You can just go for them both, right? You can go Ethereal first, gets to Discover, gets to
Head
see.
crack! Boom! Head crack always gets there, Raven.
It's just true. 100% of the time it works.
Yep.
Seiko gonna take this game in a pretty incredible fashion. Not even needing the Evocation, not even needing half the crazy tools he got access to, but most importantly, that opening of Quest and Adventurer, One Maker, Potion, just put so much power in the early game that Jarla could not keep up. And to be fair to Jarla, he didn't have much chance to keep up with his opening hand because it was trash.
It was complete trash indeed. And I told you, like, I that turn that Seiko had, like, I just loved it so much. It's just one of those turns where just every small part of it just works out so perfectly. Like, I am going to move in with that turn, and we're going to raise a family together. That's what's happening here, Raven. It was perfect. The backstab, Potion of Illusion, putting everything together. Huge threat with the questing as well. It was eventually dealt with, and actually weirdly crucial was the dagger that was stolen from the Sticky Finger as well, because it dealt with the redemption from the Shadow Word Death after that as well, which is a really, really huge deal. But even despite all of that, it was just way too much pressure, way too consistently for Jarla's trash hand to be able to deal with.
It did feel like sometimes in Hearthstone, and any game and certain things, of course, is you afterwards you look back and go, I was just meant to win that game.
Yes.
Like, nothing was going to stop me winning that game of Hearthstone because it just went too well. And that was definitely one game. And don't get me wrong, Seiko piloted it very well, of course. He handled the turns extremely well. But it was just a game that just felt like Seiko was going to win that every single time, no matter what. And that has led him potentially in a position to 3-0 this series and make this one a swift one. And also put a much-needed point on the board here for Seiko.
Yeah, haven't really talked about the overall standings here between the two players, both of them with fairly middling records at this point. Seiko, one of the players who have only completed 3 matches at this point, so him going to an even record over essentially his first 2 weeks of round robin, if you want to look at it that way, would be a huge deal for him, of course. Whereas Jarla extending to a positive record would equally mean he can start looking up as opposed to looking down here.
Yeah, and already we're going to go into this mage mirror. Where are you on these? I know especially Gia and Derek have been discussing mage mulligans a lot. Where do you stand on the craziness, Saul?
The craziness being like people one-keeping Cram Session and all that kind of business?
Yeah, among other things, yeah.
I mean, Cram Session is a deceptively highly rated card in the mulligan if you look at it in a lot of matchups. But it's one of the ones that you have to be careful with because in a lot of matchups, it's high mulligan win rate, but fairly low keep rate. Like sometimes it's the second or third best card in the mulligan, but it's only being kept 30 to 40% of the time, which means people are only keeping it when they have the spell damage to support to go with it, right? So therefore it's winning a lot of games. So it is one of those things where you do have to look a little bit deeper into what the stats actually mean as opposed to just looking at the numbers and taking it at face value. But I do personally feel that maybe Gia and Derek are undervaluing the card a little bit in the opening hand, just based on what the statistics say. I do think it's a very, very powerful opener, and I do think just keeping Cram Session, you do have a very high likelihood of finding Primordial Studies, Lab Partner, Astromancer, Solarian, all of these different things that can enable you to have a good turn with it.
Yeah, once you add together the rest of your number of draws up until that point of it being playable, the percentage of spell damage options you have is actually quite high when you look at it. So I think these mulligans for Mage will forever be interesting and maybe even forever be changing as well as matchups change, of course. But double one maker opening for Seiko is going to keep his resources high at least. But now for Jarla, all the big power plays in his hand, but just not quite the payoff for them yet.
Not quite, no, but there is now Apprentice, Shenvala, Coin, and Ray of Frost, which can all come together potentially on turn 4. So the question then becomes, what happens here? And just to round out the conversation from the opening of the game, you saw the respect that Seiko paid to spell damage minions, and by extension to Cram Session, where he just ripped a Devolving Missile straight up on the Blood Mage Thanos there, which not only kills a card drawn naturally, but also now shuts down this Cram Session that Jarla has in hand right now, which he would have been very happy to cast here otherwise, I'm sure.
How are you feeling about Flat Shenvala here? Yeah, okay, Jarla got to this play before I wanted to break it down, but this is interesting because it obviously does just die to double trade Ping. But is that a potentially good enough trade-off with Coin Jandis as a backup?
Yeah, Coin Jandis is the reason why I think this play is even legal to begin with, because otherwise you'd be potentially shutting down basically what your hand did in that position. I think regardless of how strong Jarla thought his follow-up was here, the one thing he did not want to see was the Firebrand in response, because that's just way too big a swing turn here from Seiko's side.
Yeah, just a one-off in Seiko's list, but we do know Seiko is one of the players in European Grandmasters who does like to experiment a lot. And I feel, at least, Sol, there's a lot more hits than misses when Seiko brings a deck to a tournament.
Yeah, it does seem that way, right? He does seem like one of the players that might be prone to doing something a little bit wacky, like maybe Seiko was just Warmer this week, and he was the guy that ended up on the full hard counter Bomb Warrior lineup, right? It seems like something that would be within his wheelhouse. But you are right, like his results do kind of speak for themselves after a point. He has innovated a few things that have really picked up and spread throughout the rest of the Grandmasters, and he does put up a very impressive win rate while marching to the beat of his own drum just a little bit.
Now, not really biggest Jandis outcome we've ever seen there. Seiko to be able to get the answers at least straight away as to what was the weak version.
Wow, a lot of respect to the board, just trading it all down immediately.
He is running it. I think both players are running natural Conjurer's Calling, aren't they? So I think that is reasonable.
It is reasonable, yeah, but there was an option there to try and gain a good amount of tempo and a good amount of aggression by just freezing out the 5/5, then maybe just spending the second mana on the one thief instead of the second Ray of Frost and pushing a lot of damage. But I like the way that that Seiko went about it.
And the thing with Seiko as well is, although he's using a lot of resources, he has a lot of resources. Double One Thief and Primordial Studies in hand. It means he's not even running short for at least the foreseeable future. Here, though, Jarla has a lot of options for himself. He could just dump as much of this as possible, but this doesn't get him the giant this turn.
Go. This isn't going. This is the opposite of going. You've stopped.
Works against me.
Jarla, not to be rushed.
I insist. I'm rushing him.
He can't possibly hold, right?
He can. There's a theory that says this apprentice lives based on a great deal of the cards that he's seen from Seiko already from an empty board. It is possible. Oh! It's not living.
Quick, Conjurer's Call on it, Seiko.
It's so hard to turn down an evocation, though. Like, you've got to weigh this up, right? Like, evocation is so premium. Like, how often do you just still find an answer off these one thieves anyway? Okay, picks up the dragon. Very happy to use the Arcane Breath after picking up the dragon.
Session. No spell damage quite yet, but it will make one heck of a turn 10 with Malagos.
Oh, you've moved on now, have you? It's not Mali Missiles anymore. It's Mali Cram Session now that we want to see.
Even you can't be upset at that change. Come on. Yeah. Mali Cram Session, is that not just one of the best turns ever?
We got there. We got the evocation back in the end. Big fan. Oh, Conjurer's Calling, the draw off the top for Jarla.
Looks like it's most likely going to be an evocation to set up for the giant Conjurer's turn. I don't think it's realistic at all to think that this would work without a apprentice, which is the drawback of Jarla going... I don't want to say Jarla went slow so he couldn't evocation. I think Jarla very clearly didn't want to that turn.
Yeah, I
because
agree.
he did still have the time, but this is the drawback, right? His apprentice was dealt with, which makes this evocation significantly worse.
Yeah. And to be clear, I think I would have done it in a heartbeat on the previous turn. I think I would have just ripped the evocation and gone in and tried to land the giant.
I would have definitely done that and probably messed it up and not landed the giant. Due to my own failings. Not even all the spells would have cost 0 and I still would have messed it up, I think.
Yeah, but I think the only possible extremely niche outcome this turn, where you can get it all done, potentially with the Conjurer's Calling as well, is when you Font of Power first into the Sorcerer's Apprentice. But even then, I think it's way too much mana, because you still have to spend the 2 at that point on the Apprentice to get it down, so you just straight up don't have enough for the Conjurer's Calling at that point. So I think it's just straight up impossible to do it all that turn without an Apprentice.
Yeah, so Seiko does get a little bit of wiggle room this turn, because he saw a pretty lackluster evocation. But do you think that gives any kind of read for Seiko what this hand is?
I think you can put together a fairly good read that the left-hand card is Mana Giant, yes.
Your presence offends.
Portal. Ooh.
That's annoying. So I've just evolving missiles though, which why not at this point? It seems like a pretty good target. It's just popped up and that it's going to disappear at the end of this turn, so... Oh wow, okay.
Sure. Seems good.
Font of Power's there as well.
Oh! Order.
Time runs out on me.
Gotta get this Cram Session rolling, right? The Mali Dream is dead. You've played your spell damage minion. The discount's gone.
You could draw another!
Yeah. That's a huge deal.
Gotta drop it, right?
It's a 0 mana 8/8. Yes, you play it.
I love it. Hey, I've seen some people not subtle, okay?
I know.
I've seen some people have, like, force themselves to wait.
I know. The Ray of Frost. It's a twin spell version, so he plays it first to get the discount on the Mana Giant, but he needs help here. He really wants to be able to answer the 8/8 on the opposing side, and he can't, but he does get Arcane Devourer, which is a big deal over a long term, but whether or not Jarla can even afford to think in the long term here remains to be seen.
Oh, there's options upon options now for Seiko.
Nah, there's one.
There's even more!
There's one solitary option.
Well, if you pretend Prime doesn't exist, I was even thinking what Deep Freeze on the 5/5 actually achieves.
Hmm.
Okay. Clean.
Start, at least. Excellent. Good work so far. Fantastic work so far. Anyway, this 8/6 dies. Oh! 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 That's insane!
When I did mention there are games in which you are just born to win, and I believe instead of games, I should have said series at this point.
Both 8 drops off the board. For the record, that is why you Solarian. Like, you can Conjurer's Calling your own 8 drop all you want, like double Conj. They still have 8 drops, and they still have a Conjurer's Calling in your hand. So you're just creating this weird kind of equilibrium. You don't pull ahead doing that, because you know that most of the time you leave their 8 drops up and they're able to use their Conjurer's Calling themselves. Solarian Prime has the option, if it chooses... If it chooses to bless you, it can win the game there by actually just removing the 8 drops from the board.
And honestly, we've all seen some crazy primes, right? That is not up for debate. But I feel like that is like Prime Elite. You know, it just did exactly, no more, no less, exactly what you wanted it to do on a tough board. It did. There were no drawbacks. There were no weird moments that Prime does that it does sometimes. It was perfect. It was a highly elite Prime there from Seiko. It could be the turn that just wins in the game.
An efficient killing machine. That's all it was that turn. I mean, sure, why not? Yeah, let's do this. This seems fun.
Oh, you could just do it twice. Why not have a 4-10?
Yeah.
And there we go. Jarla's going to tap out, and that's going to make Seiko win this series 3-0. And like I said, Seiko played very well, but things also went with him as well. Like, that was an incredible series, and that's one of those matches where you're just glad. Like, that is just an easy win. And that's not even taking anything away from Jarla. The stars just aligned there for Seiko.
Yeah, there's an old football cliche of, your name's already on the trophy when things are going your way and you're getting every refereeing decision, you're getting the run of the green and everything's going your way. Usually it applies to Man United, let's be honest. There's no real trophy up for grabs just yet until Seiko, goes through playoffs, qualifies for the World Championship. But certainly that seemed like a series that he was destined to win up until a point, because multiple matchups really which are supposed to really go very long and back and forth and quite grindy and threat for threat, resource for resource. Seiko just blew it out because Jarla just didn't really have the options on the other side to counteract what he's been doing.
Yeah, and what a difference a day makes here as RDU after today takes a first step ahead of the game by taking a win over Bunny Hopper, sitting at the top of Division 8.